Hello, juniors, and welcome to yet another in a series of short video lectures. Today, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about engagement and assessment. Um, in your HPSC and in general, as well as an integrated lab, you've had the opportunity to see a number of different role plays to participate and to actually be involved in an interview yourself. So we just want to spend a little bit of time today reviewing those engagement skills because they're going to be very critical to you as you move into your career as a social worker, engaging and assessing to really look at what's the best thing to do when you're working with your clients and how to move forward. So let's talk a little bit about the whole notion of client engagement and assessment. So when we look at starting our work with our clientele, the first thing that we have to recognize is we have to move into our engagement process. The engagement process is where we want to start because it's where we come into contact with our clients often for the first time and recognizing that that can be a very tricky time in the work relationship. But there are some things that you can do that we'll just kind of talk about today that will actually help you be much more successful in terms of being able to engage and work with that client population that you have. You have to know that one of the things that is kind of a hallmark of social work practice is that relationships are absolutely essential. I always say my own personally that you will have a relationship with your client and you have a lot of power and determination about whether it's going to be a good relationship or whether it's going to be a bad relationship, but you'll have one nevertheless. So it's about how we often start out that makes a huge difference in terms of the work that we actually end up doing. So the attending skills that you will be able to demonstrate are going to be very important. And while they may not look like they're very important things, but they are very important. Think about when you're first meeting someone and how nerve-wracking that can be and how you're paying attention to all these things. So the things you need to keep in mind as it relates to attending is making sure that you're listening to your client, that your verbal and your nonverbal communication is actually showing interest, that you are making eye contact when appropriate, you're leaning into the conversation, you're nodding when people are sharing things with you that you agree with, you're communicating interest, you're asking open-ended questions. And also, which can be very difficult for newer social workers, is allowing that silence. Sometimes you may have to sit and let a client ponder and get in touch with their feelings. And that might be uncomfortable because you might feel like, I don't know what I need to say next. And oftentimes it's about waiting for that silence and allowing that client to compose and gain and share what they feel comfortable sharing. And also, even little things like taking notes, making sure that you get permission from folks about whether it's okay for them to be writing, showing them what you're writing, and letting them know what you're going to do with their writing are all a part of the attending skills that you need to pay attention to. So again, we're looking at the greeting, making sure that you're very deliberate about greeting, uh, the attending skills that I just mentioned, discussing the services and the client expectations. So discussing what services that you're there to offer, what your agency does, are all going to be very important things for you to keep in mind. Um, Determining whether the agency can actually work and worker can actually help. You know, is this going to be a good fit? Is it going to culturally meet the needs? All of those things there. What are the services you offer? Orient the client to what's going to happen step by step, and then moving to the paperwork, which makes it legal for us to actually move forward in the work that we do with our clients. These are all important things to keep in mind around the engagement process. Um, you move from the engagement to then really the assessing. And it's really trying to understand clearly more about what the actual need is. And it's not the need necessarily from your perspective, but the need that the client is identifying for you. Oftentimes you'll find that clients don't really have a real clear concept all the time about what all the needs they actually have. And so you may be instrumental in terms of helping them figure some of those things out, but it's really driven by the client. Recognizing the strengths, skills, and assets that the client brings. Um, Identifying that client system. Who is it? Who's in the family? Who's going to be involved? What behaviors need to change? Those kind of things. Understand the client interactions, as well as gather missing information. So sometimes what clients don't share with you is important as what people do share with you. So really think holistically to make sure that you get a good sense of what's happening for this family during that assessment phase. Some of the areas you may want to think about, and I have a number of different families that are represented here, are looking at things to actually assess. So looking at basic needs, housing, the role of kinship. Sometimes kin can play a very active and productive role in helping a family through tough situations. At other times, kin can be quite a barrier. You know, if Uncle Joe, who's just gotten out of prison, comes and lives at your house and invites his buddies over, that could be creating drama for your family. So when you're assessing, making sure that you're looking at all of those things: violence in the home, whether it's occurring or whether it isn't, what's mental health for all the people that are there, day-to-day parenting. Are you able to make the basic needs of the kids that you're looking at? Is substance abuse something that occurs on a regular basis? Are there medical concerns? Um, what about children, and are they being taken care of in a good fashion? These are all assessment domains or conversations that you want to have with clients when it's appropriate, when you're looking at those kinds of family assessments and interventions. You want to amass, and you really want to get to really starting to understand what the problems are. And so as folks are talking to you and you're gathering information, uh, problems will fall into some of these categories. You know, they'll be interpersonal in nature in terms of maybe there's difficulty for a teenager to connect and have friends with other teenagers. There might be dissatisfaction in a social relationship. You know, you might be working with a husband and a wife who are at the brink of divorce. There could be organizational problems. There could be issues that you're having at work, with coworkers, or in a school setting. A difficulty in role performance. You know, if I'm depressed and I'm not able to hold a job, then I can't be the provider for my family or the family or what the family might need from me at a given time. So that might be a problem that I need to resolve. Social transitions. You know, I decided to go through the divorce, and now my whole life looks different, and so that can be problematic. Behavior or psychological problems, in terms of just being able to function at an emotional state, that's not problematic. Inadequate resources, you will see quite a bit. People living in poverty, people not having enough to make basic needs. Rent is from month to month, and we may make it some months and we may not. So all of these are the types of problems that you're looking for as you're doing the assessment. Decision making. Sometimes folks have difficulty in terms of how they're going to decide what they're going to do. You know, I've got a 16-year-old who stays out all night and he's smoking drugs, and I'm afraid to confront him because he might get angry. But decisions have to be made around what's going to be important for this child to be successful. Sometimes there are issues around culture and religion and conflicts with those things. So problems will fall into these categories. So as you're moving forward with your assessment, making sure that you look at all these particular areas and start to prioritize the issues from that standpoint. At the same time, you're also going to be looking at strengths. What are some assets that this family actually has? Do they have family that are supportive and that could help them through this crisis that they might be experiencing? Are there friends that are available? Are they new here in town and socially isolated? Those are all important pieces of information that you will need. Where's their education? Do they finish school? Are they in college? Because that's going to have an impact on the type of employment they can make. And so then the whole basic need issue comes into question. So these are strengths that you can possibly identify as you're working with folks. Most folks who you work with, this will not be the first time that they've had a problem in their life. So do they have a history of being able to work through difficult situations? What kind of personal qualities do they have? Are they likable people? Do they have good personalities? Those kind of things are also important things that you will need to look at in terms of strength, and sometimes they actually even remind clients that you're working with that these are actual strengths. What kind of physical attributes they have, financial resources. Do they have a sister who's a doctor in another part of the country that they can borrow money from if they're in a tight? What kind of attitudes do they have? Are they fatalistic in terms of how they look at things, or do they have an upbeat, hopeful approach to looking at life as a glass half full as opposed to half empty? What's the role of spirituality in their life? So all of these are very important aspects of looking at what families need when you're involved in that engagement and assessment process. And so we want to make sure that we are paying very close attention to these particular items as you're moving forward in your work as a social worker. So again, engagement, assessment are very important tools, and there'll be skills that you will need to demonstrate in classroom settings, as well as in your internships as you move further in your journey as a social worker. As always, please review the videos before you come to class, and hopefully they will accent your reading and be prepared for our in-class exercises. See you in class.